In a world where strength is often mistaken for power, one boy proved that true dominance comes from control, not intimidation. Nathan, the new kid at Ridgewood High, walked into a battlefield disguised as a school, where fear ruled and the weak had no voice. But in just one moment, everything changed. A single punch shattered the hierarchy. The bullies fell. And for the first time, the students of Ridgewood High could stand tall. This is the story of a fighter who never wanted to fight, but became a protector instead. Welcome to TH Voices of the Underdog, where we tell the stories of those who rise against the odds. Don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with our latest videos, because the truth deserves to be told. Nathan adjusted his backpack strap as he stepped out of the car, staring at the imposing structure of Ridgewood High. The large brick building stood tall, its walls weathered with age, its windows reflecting the dull morning light. Students swarmed the front courtyard, laughing, gossiping, and greeting one another after the long summer break. For most of them, today was just another ordinary school day. But for Nathan, it was a new beginning, or at least, another temporary stop in his life's ever-changing routine. His mother had driven him to school that morning, offering little in terms of farewell words. They both knew the drill. This wasn't the first time he was transferring to a new school, and it likely wouldn't be the last. "Try to stay out of trouble," she had murmured before driving away, though they both knew that trouble had a way of finding him whether he wanted it or not. Nathan exhaled and stepped onto the pavement, moving toward the front entrance. He walked with purpose, his posture relaxed but deliberate, his gaze focused but never lingering too long in one place. Years of experience had taught him how to blend in without looking weak, how to avoid drawing unnecessary attention without seeming afraid. And yet, he could already feel eyes on him. Nathan wasn't naive. He knew that transferring to a new school, especially mid-year, came with certain expectations. The moment he walked through those front doors, he became the center of curiosity. New kids always drew attention. Who was he? Where was he from? Was he cool? Was he weak? Questions like these ran through the minds of students who watched him navigate the halls for the first time. Some students whispered as he passed, "Who's that guy? Must be new. He looks serious, kind of intimidating." Nathan ignored them, focusing instead on the layout of the school. He had memorized the map the night before, studying the locations of classrooms, exits, and security cameras. It was a habit, a skill drilled into him over years of moving from place to place. Know your environment before it knows you. As he reached his assigned locker, he noticed something else, subtle, yet impossible to ignore. The way students moved, the way they interacted. There was a hierarchy here. Some students walked confidently, their heads high, laughing loudly without a care. Others kept to the edges, heads down, avoiding eye contact like prey trying to remain unseen. Nathan had seen this dynamic before. He had lived in it. This school wasn't just run by teachers and principals. It was controlled by fear. Nathan's childhood had been shaped by violence. He grew up in a rough neighborhood where fights weren't just common, they were expected. You either learned to defend yourself, or you became a victim. His father, a former martial artist, had seen the dangers of their environment and decided to prepare Nathan for them. Training was never optional. While other kids were playing video games or riding bikes, Nathan was throwing punches at a heavy bag, running drills in their cramped garage, learning the art of controlled aggression. "You never start a fight," his father had always told him, "but you always finish it." By the time he was 10, he could disarm an opponent twice his size. By 12, he could counter a strike before it even landed. And by 15, he had already been in more real fights than most people would in a lifetime. He had never wanted to be a fighter. But survival wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. Now, standing in the halls of Ridgewood High, Nathan knew that, no matter how much he tried to start over, his past would always follow him. Nathan first spotted them in the cafeteria. They were impossible to miss. Sitting at the center of the largest table, surrounded by lackeys and admirers, were three individuals who radiated confidence, the kind that came from knowing no one dared to challenge them. Ryan, the leader, was lean and athletic. He wasn't just popular, he was feared. His smirk carried the arrogance of someone who had never lost, not because he was the strongest, but because he made sure no one dared to fight back. Beside him sat Derek, the enforcer. Tall, muscular, with the kind of frame that looked like it belonged in a boxing ring rather than a school cafeteria. He cracked his knuckles absent-mindedly, as if waiting for an excuse to use them. Then there was Lucas, the smallest but undoubtedly the most dangerous of the three. He wasn't physically intimidating, but his mind was a weapon. Nathan could tell by the way he watched people, analyzing them, filing away information for later use. Lucas wasn't just part of the gang. He was the strategist, the one who made sure the right victims were chosen and the right moves were made. Nathan had seen this kind of group before. He knew how they operated. They ruled Ridgewood High not because they had authority, but because they had control. Control through intimidation, control through power. And by the way other students lowered their gazes when passing by, Nathan could tell they had been in charge for a long time. Nathan had been in enough schools to know how this would play out. He had seen the pattern. First, the small tests. An accidental bump in the hallway, a fake friendly joke meant to gauge his reaction, a small push to see if he would push back. Most students had two choices, submission or defiance. If you submitted, you became a permanent target. If you fought back immediately, you became an enemy. Nathan would do neither. He had learned long ago that the best way to handle people like Ryan and his gang wasn't to fight them outright. It was to let them think they had the upper hand. Let them get comfortable in their belief that he was just another nobody. Patience was a weapon, sharper than any blade. So when Nathan sat alone in the cafeteria, taking slow, deliberate bites of his food, he wasn't surprised when Ryan smirked and leaned over to Lucas, whispering something. Nathan exhaled quietly. He knew that look. It was the look of a predator spotting new prey. But what Ryan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Nathan wasn't prey. And if they wanted to test that, they would soon regret it. Nathan knew that his first day at Ridgewood High was just the beginning. He had no interest in making enemies, but he also had no intention of running. This wasn't the first time he had stepped into a battlefield disguised as a high school. And when trouble finally found him, as it always did, he would be ready. Nathan had been at Ridgewood High for less than a week, but he could already feel the weight of lingering eyes on him. It was something he had expected, the usual curiosity that came with being the new kid, but this was different. This wasn't just casual interest from students wondering where he was from. This was calculated observation, the kind that came from predators sizing up their prey. Ryan and his gang had noticed him almost immediately. Nathan had sensed it from the moment he stepped into the cafeteria on his first day. The way Lucas leaned over to whisper to Ryan, the smirk that formed on Ryan's lips, it was the same routine Nathan had seen countless times before. It didn't matter which school it was. There were always people like Ryan, and they always followed the same pattern. Nathan knew what was coming. The only question was how long they would wait before making their move. It happened on Wednesday. Nathan had settled into a quiet routine, moving between classes without lingering too long in crowded areas, eating alone at the farthest table in the cafeteria, avoiding unnecessary conversations. He wasn't scared of people. He simply had no interest in unnecessary attention. Unfortunately, Ryan had other plans. The cafeteria was filled with the usual noise, students chatting loudly, the clatter of trays, and the occasional burst of laughter. Nathan sat at the corner table, calmly eating his lunch, his mind wandering through distant thoughts. Then, without warning, it happened. A sudden, deliberate shove. A cold, sticky sensation spread across Nathan's chest as a drink spilled down the front of his black T-shirt. The liquid soaked through the fabric, sending a brief chill down his spine. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the cafeteria as students turned to watch. Nathan already knew who it was before he even looked up. Ryan stood over him, smirking, his empty cup still in his hand. "Oh man," Ryan said, feigning concern. "I didn't see you there." Derek and Lucas flanked him, both grinning as if this were the funniest thing they had seen all day. Nathan slowly looked down at his soaked shirt, then back up at Ryan. The cafeteria had gone silent, everyone waiting for his reaction. Would he get angry? Would he retaliate? Would he panic? But Nathan did none of those things. Without a single change in his expression, he grabbed a napkin, calmly wiped his shirt, and placed it on his tray. Then he stood up, met Ryan's gaze for 2 long seconds, and walked away without a word. Ryan's smirk faltered. That wasn't the reaction he had expected. Most people, when confronted by him, would either lash out or shrink back in fear. That was how the game was played. You either fought back and became his enemy, or you cowered and became his permanent target. But Nathan did neither. He didn't get angry, he didn't get scared, he just walked away. The silence in the cafeteria was deafening. Students whispered amongst themselves, glancing between Ryan and Nathan's retreating figure. Ryan clenched his jaw, gripping the empty cup in his hand. "This guy," Lucas murmured beside him. "He's different," Ryan scoffed. "He thinks he's too good to react." Derek cracked his knuckles. "Maybe he just needs a little more encouragement." Ryan's smirk returned, but this time there was something darker behind it. "He's just trying to act tough," Ryan said. "Don't worry, I'll make sure he learns his place." Nathan had made one mistake. He had ignored them. And Ryan wasn't about to let that slide. Later that day, Ryan and his gang gathered behind the school gym, where they usually met to discuss their next targets. "That guy thinks he's untouchable," Derek muttered, still irritated about the cafeteria incident. "We can't let that stand." "He's not scared of us," Lucas said. "That means one of 2 things. Either he's incredibly stupid or," he paused, eyes narrowing, "or he knows something we don't." Ryan leaned against the brick wall, considering his next move. "Doesn't matter," he said. "One way or another, he's going to realize who runs this school." Lucas hesitated before speaking again. "I did some digging. He transferred from a different school, some place known for having a lot of fights." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "So he's used to violence?" Lucas nodded. "Maybe. But if he was some kind of fighter, wouldn't we have heard something by now? There's no way a guy like him could stay under the radar if he was that dangerous." Ryan smirked. "Then that just means we have to push him harder." Derek grinned. "When do we make our move?" Ryan chuckled. "Let's give him a few more days to settle in. Let him think we've lost interest." He crushed the empty drink cup in his hand. "Then we'll remind him who's really in charge here." Nathan knew exactly what was happening. He wasn't oblivious. He had dealt with people like Ryan before. The moment he had walked away in the cafeteria, he had known he had made himself a challenge in Ryan's eyes. Bullies thrived on power. They needed control. And the second Nathan refused to react, he had stripped them of it. That wouldn't sit well with Ryan. Nathan could already tell they were planning something. It was only a matter of time before they tried again. But he wasn't worried. They saw him as an easy target because he hadn't fought back yet. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Nathan wasn't afraid. He was waiting. Ryan thought that spilling a drink on Nathan would humiliate him. Instead, Nathan's lack of reaction only made Ryan more determined to break him. The bullies at Ridgewood High weren't used to being ignored, and Ryan had no intention of letting it go. Nathan knew it was coming. A bigger test, a bigger challenge, and when it finally happened, he would be ready. For the past few days, Nathan had been waiting. He knew it was only a matter of time before Ryan and his gang made their next move. At school, they had been watching him more closely, observing how he carried himself, searching for any signs of weakness. Ryan still wore his usual smug smirk when he passed Nathan in the hallways, but there was a new intensity in his gaze, a silent challenge. Derek, as always, cracked his knuckles loudly whenever Nathan walked by, his body language full of pent-up aggression. Lucas was different. He watched quietly, never speaking much, but Nathan could tell he was analyzing him. Nathan had dealt with people like Lucas before, guys who weren't the strongest physically, but were the most dangerous mentally. Nathan could tell that Lucas wasn't fully convinced about going after him. But in the end, Lucas wasn't the leader Ryan was, and Ryan hated being ignored. That was why Nathan knew it wouldn't just be another cafeteria incident. No, this time, they wanted a real confrontation. It was late afternoon when Nathan finally encountered them. School had ended, and the students were already dispersing in different directions, some heading to their after-school activities, others hanging out in the parking lot. Nathan didn't linger. He never did. The less time spent in unnecessary places, the better. The walk home was relatively short. He had memorized the streets and alleys around the school, noting the best routes, escape points, and blind spots. It was a habit, one drilled into him from years of experience. But today, something felt different. Nathan had sensed it before he even saw them. A shift in the air, a slight silence in the usual after-school commotion. Then, as he turned a corner near an empty lot, they were waiting for him. Ryan stood in the middle of the narrow sidewalk, arms crossed, his smirk as cocky as ever. Derek was to his right, cracking his knuckles as usual, but this time there was no subtlety. He wanted a fight. Lucas stood slightly behind them, hands in his pockets, his eyes flickering with something between calculation and hesitation. Nathan came to a slow stop a few feet away from them, his posture neutral but alert. He had been expecting this. Ryan grinned. "Well, look who it is, our quiet little friend." Nathan remained silent. Ryan stepped forward slightly, tilting his head. "You know, there's a tradition at Ridgewood High for new students, a simple little thing we like to call a welcome fee." Derek chuckled darkly, rolling his shoulders. "That's right. $100 and we'll let you walk home like a good little boy." Nathan didn't move, didn't blink. His gaze remained fixed on Ryan's. Ryan lifted his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, it's nothing personal. Just the way things work around here. Pay up and we won't have any problems." Nathan let the silence stretch between them. Then, in a voice as cold as steel, he spoke. "I'll give you one chance. Walk away now." For a moment, there was complete silence. Then Ryan burst into laughter. The sound echoed down the empty street, filled with mockery and disbelief. "You hear that?" Ryan elbowed Derek. "He thinks he's giving us a warning." Derek grinned, stepping forward, his fists clenching. "I think we need to teach this guy a little respect." But Lucas hesitated. His sharp eyes studied Nathan closely, his instincts screaming at him that something wasn't right. Nathan wasn't scared, not even a little. Most students would be nervous, shaking, making excuses, or trying to run. But Nathan, he stood completely still. His breathing was calm. His shoulders were relaxed. His eyes were too steady, too controlled. Lucas knew that look. He had seen it in fighters before. Something was off. But Ryan was too busy enjoying himself to notice. "All right, new kid. You had your chance. Too bad you didn't take it. Derek lunged forward. Nathan moved before Derek even finished his step. One shift of weight. One precise motion. Derek's punch barely left his shoulder before Nathan sidestepped, grabbing his wrist and twisting it with brutal efficiency. Derek let out a sharp grunt of pain as Nathan wrenched his arm, forcing him forward. And then, with a single calculated strike, Nathan delivered an elbow to Derek's stomach, knocking the air out of him. Derek stumbled backward, gasping, his face twisted in shock. Ryan's smirk disappeared. Lucas took a slow step backward. Nathan's gaze flickered to Ryan next. His expression hadn't changed. His voice remained as calm as ever. "I warned you." Ryan's jaw tightened. His confidence wavered for the first time. Lucas, now visibly tense, muttered, "Ryan, maybe we should stop." But Ryan wasn't ready to back down yet. His pride was on the line. Nathan could see it in his eyes, the conflict between logic and ego. Lucas was smart enough to know this was a losing battle. Ryan, on the other hand, was too stubborn to admit it. Nathan exhaled slowly. "If you walk away now, I won't do worse." Ryan clenched his fists. His ego told him to fight. His instincts told him not to. For the first time, Ryan hesitated, and in that hesitation, Nathan knew he had won. Lucas stepped in, placing a hand on Ryan's arm. "Not today." Ryan scowled, but he didn't argue. "Next time," Ryan muttered, his voice low and full of resentment. Nathan didn't respond. He simply watched as the three slowly backed away. Derek was still gasping for air, his pride shattered. Lucas was deep in thought, processing what he had just seen. Ryan was furious. Nathan had embarrassed him, in front of his own crew. As they disappeared down the street, Nathan stood still, waiting until they were out of sight. Then, slowly, he rolled his shoulders back and exhaled. This wasn't over. Ryan wasn't the type to let things go. Nathan had just made himself his biggest problem. Nathan had refused to pay the welcome fee, and in doing so, he had humiliated Ryan in front of his crew. He knew what this meant. Ryan wasn't going to stop. This was just the beginning. Nathan had given them a warning, but the next time they came for him, he wouldn't hold back. Ryan could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His pride had already been dented when Nathan had humiliated him in front of Derek and Lucas. But now, as they stood in the dimly lit alleyway near the school, with the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife, he had had enough. Nathan wasn't scared. That alone enraged Ryan. For years, he had built his reputation at Ridgewood High through fear, intimidation, and carefully calculated violence. People either feared him or respected him, but no one ignored him. Yet here was this new kid refusing to react the way Ryan expected, refusing to fall in line. Ryan clenched his fists. "This ends now." With a roar of frustration, Ryan lunged at Nathan, aiming to strike first to prove a point. Bad idea. Nathan didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. He reacted. One step forward. One perfect counter. His fist shot out like a coiled spring, striking Ryan directly in the stomach. The impact was instant, a brutal, controlled hit to the solar plexus, knocking the wind from Ryan's lungs. Ryan's eyes widened in shock. Pain exploded through his torso, and for the first time in his life he felt something unfamiliar. Helplessness. His knees buckled. He gasped for air, but none came. His body betrayed him, folding forward as he crashed to the ground, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Nathan simply stepped back, his expression unchanged. One punch. That was all it took. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek's eyes widened in disbelief. Lucas froze, realizing immediately that this wasn't a normal fight, but Derek was too dumb to stop, and that was his biggest mistake. Seeing Ryan collapse to his knees only fueled Derek's anger. No one had ever taken down Ryan that fast. And Derek was bigger, stronger, the one everyone feared the most when it came to brute force. He had been in fights before, plenty of them. He wasn't going to let some quiet transfer student embarrass them like this. With a furious growl, Derek charged forward, his entire weight thrown into the attack. Nathan saw it coming before Derek even finished his first step. He had fought people like Derek before. Big, powerful, reckless, predictable. Derek swung, a wild, powerful punch meant to crush anything in its path. Nathan didn't even need to dodge. Instead, he moved in. With a slight shift in weight, Nathan sidestepped smoothly, letting Derek's momentum do the work. Then, with perfect timing, Nathan hooked his foot behind Derek's ankle and gave a quick, precise sweep. Derek's own force betrayed him. His feet left the ground, and for a brief moment he was weightless. Then, crash. The pavement greeted him harshly, the impact sending a shockwave of pain through his back and ribs. The fight was over before it even started. Lucas watched in horrified silence. Ryan was still on his knees, gasping for breath. Derek was on the ground, groaning in pain, his head spinning from the impact. And Nathan stood there, completely calm, as if none of this had been difficult for him. Lucas wasn't stupid. He was the strategist, the thinker, the one who always assessed risks before acting. And what he saw in that moment sent a cold chill down his spine. Nathan wasn't just tough. Nathan was trained. His movements weren't random, weren't lucky. They were controlled, deliberate, efficient. Lucas had seen plenty of street fights before. This wasn't a street fight. This was something else entirely. When Nathan turned his gaze toward him, Lucas stiffened. Nathan's calm, piercing stare locked onto him, and then, in a quiet, steady voice, Nathan asked, "Do you want to try?" Lucas's throat went dry. He glanced at Ryan, still gasping for breath. Then at Derek, still groaning on the pavement. He could fight. He could swing and hope for the best. But Lucas wasn't an idiot. He had lost before even starting. So, slowly, he shook his head and took a step back. Nathan didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. With the same quiet confidence he had walked into the fight with, Nathan turned around and walked away, leaving 3 humiliated bullies in his wake. As Nathan disappeared down the street, Lucas exhaled deeply. Ryan still hadn't fully recovered, and Derek was too dazed to move. Lucas knew exactly what this meant. Nathan wasn't normal, and that meant one thing. Ryan. Ryan had just made the worst mistake of his life. Nathan had ended the fight in seconds, proving beyond doubt that he wasn't just some quiet new kid. He was dangerous, controlled, efficient. Ryan's ego had cost him dearly, and now, for the first time in his life, Ryan wasn't the one in control anymore. Nathan was. But Ryan wasn't the type to let things go. And if Nathan thought this was over, he was wrong. Because Ryan was already planning his revenge. The moment Nathan stepped through the front doors of Ridgewood High, he could feel the shift in the air. The usual morning buzz of students chatting, laughing, and moving through the hallways had taken on a new energy. The halls were still filled with people, but something was different. People weren't just walking past him anymore. They were watching him. Some tried to be subtle about it, stealing glances as they walked by, whispering to their friends. Others weren't so discreet, openly staring, their expressions ranging from admiration to disbelief. Nathan didn't react. He wasn't surprised. He had seen this happen before. A school built on fear and control would always react this way when something broke the cycle, and after what had happened yesterday, the cycle was shattered. For years, Ryan had ruled the school through intimidation. He didn't just have strength, he had power. People didn't just fear Ryan's fists, they feared what he represented. Ryan had built a system, one where he made the rules and everyone else followed. But now Ryan was gone. He wasn't in school. Some said he was too humiliated to show up. Others claimed he was licking his wounds, planning revenge. Nathan didn't care, because Ryan's rule was already over. The moment Nathan had put him on his knees, the moment he had taken down Derek in seconds, everything changed. Derek, once the biggest enforcer of Ryan's crew, had become a ghost. He wasn't skipping school like Ryan, but he might as well have been. Nathan saw him once in the morning standing near his locker. His usual arrogant smirk, gone. The way he used to shove students aside, stopped. Derek no longer made eye contact with anyone. Nathan knew exactly what had happened. Derek had built his entire identity around being feared. But now, everyone had seen him on the ground, gasping for air. There was no coming back from that. Lucas was different. Nathan had expected calculated moves, maybe even some kind of attempt to rebuild Ryan's power. But instead, Lucas kept his distance, not out of fear, but out of respect. Lucas was smart enough to know the truth. Ryan had lost. The best thing Lucas could do, stay out of Nathan's way. Nathan had expected the aftermath to be messy, fights, challenges, retaliation. Instead, the school changed overnight. For the first time in years, students walked without looking over their shoulders. No one was getting pushed into lockers. No one was getting cornered in the hallways. And most importantly, no one was afraid anymore. Nathan never asked for this kind of attention, but he couldn't ignore the truth. He had become something new. Nathan was leaving his last class of the day when it happened. A few students were walking past him, laughing about something, their energy lighter than usual. Then he heard a voice. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but it was exactly the kind of voice that made Nathan stop in his tracks. "Hey, kid, where do you think you're going?" Nathan turned his head slightly. Near the back entrance of the school, a group of older students had cornered a freshman. Nathan recognized their type immediately. They weren't part of Ryan's gang, but they had learned from him. They had seen how Ryan operated, using fear to get what he wanted. And now, they were trying to fill the void he left behind. Nathan watched. The freshman was clearly nervous, clutching his backpack strapped tightly as one of the bullies gave him a hard shove. Nathan could already predict what was about to happen. The freshman would try to talk his way out of it. They'd laugh in his face. Then, they'd escalate. Nathan had seen it happen too many times before. And he wasn't about to let it happen again. He didn't speak. He didn't yell. He just walked, straight toward them, not fast, not aggressive, just there. The moment the bullies noticed him, their laughter stopped. The leader of the group, a guy named Travis, turned and scowled. "What do you want, new kid?" he muttered. Nathan kept walking, slow, deliberate, and then, when he was close enough, he stopped. The freshman looked at Nathan, eyes wide. Travis's group exchanged nervous glances. Nathan tilted his head slightly. "You're done." Travis scoffed, forcing a laugh. "Oh yeah, says who?" Nathan took one more step forward. "Me." It wasn't a threat, it wasn't a challenge, it was a fact. Silence. Nathan didn't blink, didn't move, just waited. And in that moment, Travis understood. This wasn't Ryan. Ryan had ruled through fear and manipulation. But Nathan didn't need to rule, he just needed to exist. One of Travis's friends muttered, "Dude, let's just go." Another swallowed hard. "He's not worth it, man." And just like that, they backed off. Nathan never even had to raise a hand. Nathan had spent his whole life surviving. Fighting had never been his choice, it had been his necessity. But now, he didn't have to fight anymore. He had become something more. Ryan had ruled through fear. Nathan had shattered that fear with strength. And now Ridgewood High was safe. Not because someone took over Ryan's throne, but because there was no throne to take. Nathan had never expected to find a place where he belonged. But for the first time in his life, he did. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a protector. Nathan had never wanted to be a hero. He had never expected to change anything. But sometimes, fate doesn't care what you expect. He had broken the cycle of fear, not by becoming another ruler, but by showing people they didn't need one. Nathan wasn't just the new kid anymore. He was the protector of Ridgewood High, and as long as he was there, no one would ever feel afraid again.